Hello, good morning, everyone. Today we are talking about, we'll be discussing about the block 3, that is about the mass communication. So basically, we have an understanding what is mass communication. So as part of that, we understand that print and electronic media and the various form of communicating with the masses is to be termed as a mass communication. And we also understand that mass media is to be reached by anyone from anywhere, and there is the public opinion can be articulated among the communities. So there are two units in this. The first one is concept and nature of mass communication. Then the second one is trends in mass communication. So the first unit, that is the unit 7, part of block 3, is dealing with concept and nature of mass communication. That explains the nature, functions, and scope of mass communication in India. And also talks about mass communication as distinct from other forms of communication while discussing the advantages and disadvantages of mass communication. Whereas the second unit, that is unit 8, deals with the views of communication science. It talks about social semantics theory, communication revolution, information revolution, and demassification of media. So let us begin with the unit 7, that is concept and nature of mass communication. The objectives of this unit is you should be able to define the mass communication, explain the difference among various forms of communication, then analyze the advantages and disadvantages of mass communication, and also describe the interactive communication, its scope and characteristics. So let us begin. Now here, as in general, when we say that mass communication is a form of a communication with various media, similarly, mass communication, which is assumed, also has a great importance in a democratic country with a special reference to India. Because here it is described as a process of transmitting messages through mass media to large number of people across the globe. Yeah. While reaching, there are certain advantages and disadvantages, and the message is being reached to the mass audiences. The advantage can be it reaches the masses at a time, at a time, but at the same time, there is a disadvantage that it cannot get an immediate feedback. And as we understand, communication is only effective when you have a feedback, and that is a proper on-time feedback. So the three major functions of mass communication include, as surveillance of environment, correlation of the parts of the society, especially in reference to the environment, and transmission of social heritage from one generation to the next. Then the characteristic of non-verbal communication, interactive communication, mass communication, we can see that it is a distinctive form of communication. So, however, let us begin with the definition of communication. So, there are, different scholars, research scholars, and the, communication researchers who have given different aspects of definitions. If you refer to John R. Bittner in his book, Mass Communication and Interaction, according to him, he defines mass communication as the messages communicated through a mass medium to a large number of people, which is in general, if you understand. Then we have Stanley J. Barron in his book, Introduction to Mass Communication, Media Literacy and Culture, in his 4th edition, says that it is a process of creating shared meaning between the mass media and their audiences. So what Baran is saying is that it is process, communication is a process. Similarly, the mass communication is a process where we create shared meaning between the mass media and their audiences. The third one, according to the Little John and Foss, define mass communication as whereby the media organizations produce and transmit messages to large publics and process by which those messages are sought, used, and consumed by the audiences. So, Little John and Foss concentrate a focus on media organization and the part of the mass communication. However, as you know, McQuail in 1994 states that the mass communication is only one of the process of communication operating at the society-wide level, which is readily identified by its institutional characteristics. Yeah. So he says that it is a process, it is part of one process of communication, and that is catering to the wide level of the society, which is basically identified by the institutional. Here comes the concept of gatekeeping, which we'll be learning further. Then, if you put in simple words the definition of mass communication, it is the process of transfer of message to a large recipient of audiences at the same time through media or technology-driven channels from a particular entity, which has a cost or license fee, selling of space time, that is, or the media organization, which also include the infrastructure, manpower, technology, and transmission, right? However, we see that according to the Berger, the sender often is a person in some large media organization. The messages are the public. The audience tends to be large and varied. So he says that, through media, it is but for natural that when we are saying mass communication, it is only through the media organization. So according to Berger, he is trying to explain that the sender is often a person in some large media organization, and we, the public, the messages are meant for the public, yeah, and the messages are open to the public, and definitely the audience who are receiving are at the large and varied groups. So mass communication transmits varying kinds and genres of media product that broadly encompasses news, entertainment, and reality show. So by now you should have understood that mass communication is something where we see that, the transmission of information has different genres, that has news, entertainment, and reality shows. And accordingly, there could be broad categories and subgenres. So let us understand what is the nature of mass communication. So mass communication is based on 3 elements. They are nature of audience, nature of communication experience, nature of communicators. So what is nature of audience? The audience in mass communication is relatively large, heterogeneous, and anonymous. So in mass communication, the audience makes it is impossible for the mass communicator and members to interact face to face. Yeah. So in addition to being a diversified group, the receivers in mass communication are for the most part unknown to the source. What we have to understand here is, when we say that it is a communication process, The basic model of communication is SMCR. So we have a source, we have a receiver. So what is the nature of mass communication is definitely the person or the media organization who is giving the information is the source, but we are not aware of the receiver. Though in general, we can say that it is a large varied group of people in the community who are heterogeneous in nature and also unknown to the source. Yeah, the best example is that you are watching a television, you are definitely a receiver, but the source doesn't know who it is and what is their background. So the nature of audience is basically large and heterogeneous and anonymous. Then we have a nature of communication experience. This experience is public rather than private because message is addressed to particular individual and is intended for rapid consumption by large number of groups, though it is temporary in nature. So here we see that, when you are part of the mass communication, the experience is a public, not a private one. Like we have one-to-one or, communication or something, but we don't have that one. It is an open to public because it is not intended for one particular person or a group, but it is intended for the large and heterogeneous group and for rapid consumption by large number of groups. Yeah. The nature of communicators. Yeah. The source of communication doesn't work in isolation, but works with a complex organization. The message, how can we say that it works in complex organization? Because the message itself represents the efforts of many different individuals. Yeah, reporter, sub editor, if newspaper, you have printing, then you have page making, and whereas when we come to television and all those things, you have video editors, pre-production, production, post-production. So that way, nature of communicators, and it is not, it doesn't go with the one person. Yeah. So therefore, it is also expensive. Then we have mass medium. So what is mass medium? It takes place, a mass medium makes it possible for the message to reach far beyond the immediate proximity of the sender. Yeah. A few hundred feet may be all the distance the human voice can project at a crowd without the aid of public address. But whereas a mass medium can take that same message around the world. So when the same content is being put in front of a public message, there are certain limitations that it will reach to that particular people. But the same content, if used with the mass media, then here we see that mass media can reach far beyond, or rather across the world. So in a mass media scenario, the audiences are diffused. One is not sure who read or view the program at a time. The audience research techniques, however, help us knowing the audience base. So there is a method to measure. So there is an audience research techniques by which we'll come to know that who has viewed and who is watching it or reading it. However, the audiences might be empathetic readers or the viewers, but during the times of adversity and emergency, where there is hunger for information, many empirical studies suggest that the viewership of news channels upsurges at the times at the cost of entertainment channels. Just it is in comparison that how much of news channels have a value, especially when we have an adversities and emergencies. That time you won't be watching this entertainment channels or that one, but rather would like to what is happening in and across your surroundings or the environment. The next one is limited sensory channels. Yeah. We see that, the mass medium also limits the number of sensory channels. Yeah. When we watch in an auditorium, listen to a politician, all our senses could take part in the communication process. For example, after the speech, we might have shaken hands or you have touched have a feel of touch with the politician. With mass communication, we might only be able to hear and see the politician. Yeah, even though we may be at the mercy of a producer's or director's decision. Basically, what we are trying to say is one-to-one interaction is very less. Then we have impersonal versus personal communication. The another characteristics of mass communication is that it is largely impersonal because the source is able to give the information and undefined audience. Yeah. To understand that how it is impersonal and personal communication, let us understand this concept where we try to compare messages exchanged through interpersonal communication. Although first meetings between strangers are relatively impersonal, as the relationship continues, the communication becomes more and more personal. So we see that mass communication, because participants in communication are usually known to each other, messages are more impersonal. Yeah. Then we have a gatekeeper concept, as I was referring earlier. What is gatekeeper concept? This is one of the most important characteristics of mass communication. So it is self-explanatory gatekeeping. That means you try to stop the people coming inside your house. Similarly, the term gatekeeper was employed by Australian psychologist Kurt Lewin to refer to individuals or group of persons who govern the news items in communication channel. So it is through the communication channels that we see the news information. But we see that there are certain information that are being passed to the viewers or the listeners or the readers or something. So when we come back to this gatekeeping concept, we have to understand, according to Australian psychologist Kurt Lewin, that he refers the individuals or group of a person. They are the people who try to govern, or rather see that what is going to be in your content. So a gatekeeper is defined as any person or formally organized group directly involved in relaying or transforming information. Yeah, somebody has raised your hand. You have any query to be asked? So when we are saying gatekeeper, to make you better understanding, let us talk about the examples. So it is like a film producer who cuts a scene from the original script, or a network censor who deletes a scene from a primetime show. Yeah, because it is perceived being more explicit in terms of verbal communication, or sexually explicit, or a director who determines what segment of film to be used in documentary, or a newspaper executive who determines the topic for an editorial or any other individual in the processing or controlling of the message. So that is a gatekeeper's concept is something where we are referring to, controlling of the flow of information. However, we see that there are important points, and especially there are three functions of a gatekeeper. The first one is to limit the information we receive by editing this information before it is disseminated. So the editing and sub-editing and the editorial policy, it will go according to that one. Then we see that then we see that it is like to expand the amount of information we receive by giving additional facts or views. Yeah. So here the other part is that as a gatekeeper, you will expand the amount of information they receive. It all depends what kind of an information has to be given. And also to reorganize or reinterpret the information, right? So the gatekeeping function gives the choice of sharing or withholding the certain information. It could depend upon the audience, or it could depend upon the editorial policy. So this is about the gatekeeping. Then as I told you that, What is the difference between communication and mass communication is that, it has a feedback mechanism. An effective communication always has a feedback, properly laid feedback mechanism. But whereas in the mass communication, it is though we have a feedback, it might be a delayed feedback. So what is delayed feedback? It is not a unique something to the mass communication, but we see that it can occur on an interpersonal level as well. And when one is temporarily baffled by an optical illusion. It also occurs at the interpersonal level when one person temporarily refrains from commenting about another's remark or suggestion. However, delayed feedback results from the communication. Yeah, and we see that this is one of the distinguished characteristics. So that is about the characteristics and the features of the mass communication. Now let us understand what are the distinct forms of communication, mass communication. So when we refer to Larry A. Seymour, Richard Potter, and Edwin et al. In their book Communication Between Culture, we see that while describing communication, they have told that it is an ability to share your beliefs, values, ideas, and feelings. And it is at the heart of all human contact, definitely, because we believe something, we follow some values, we have some ideas, and we express our feelings. So, which is a common to all human contact. Whether you live in Canada or you live in a village, you live anywhere, yeah. So we see that, that this is a common to that one. So in their words, communication is a dynamic process in which people attempt to share their internal states with other people through the use of symbols. Yeah. So the communication, however, we understand is dynamic because it is ongoing and continuous. It is a dynamic process as in it involves two people, and similarly communication is an ongoing process because the words once spoken do not reach the dead end. They are followed by another word or action. So it is something in process where there is no end, it will continue to follow. We have thinkers like Dennis McQuell who define communication as the sending of the message from one person to other person, but you need to have some meaningful message. Yeah. Then we see that G.S. Mann and Charles R. Wright describe communication little differently, where the stress on communication being as the process of transmitting meaning between individuals. However, we see that McQuell further adds the factor of commonality while defining communication. Yeah. So, according to McQuell, communication is a process which increases commonality, but also requires elements of commonality for it to occur. Yeah. Then we have this Larry and et al. That stress on the symbolic aspect of communication. McQuell has, emphasized on commonality, and whereas this Larry and et al. Group, they emphasize on symbolic aspect of communication. They explain that communication is symbolic because there is no mind-to-mind contact between people. Since one cannot access the internal thoughts and feelings of another person, they can only be inferences drawn from the messages communicated. Melvin DeFleur describes communication as means which a group norms are expressed and by means of which social control is exerted. We have special roles being allocated, coordination of effort is achieved, expectations are made, manifest, and the entire social process is carried on. So, according to Melvin DeFleur, it is a social process that involves, a different, there's a social control being exerted, then we have different roles of allocation, then we have coordination, then we have expectation, then there is a manifestation, and therefore he terms to be as a social process. However, we see that communication has been defined the act of imparting, conferring, or delivering from one person to another person. It could be knowledge, it could be opinions, or it could be the facts. Yeah. Now let us understand what are the functions of communication. Basically, the functions of communication are surveillance of environment, that is what is going around in your society, then correlation of the parts of the society in responding to the environment. We correlate that what it is. Then transmission of social heritage from one generation to another generation. So when we are saying, surveillance function, Dominic has divided into two parts, that is beware surveillance and instrumental surveillance. Beware surveillance takes place when media forewarns us about immediate threats, for example, from the terrorism, tsunami, or hurricanes. Yeah. One of the example of beware surveillance was 9/11 attack. Yeah. We see that, the Associated Press, AP, was the first to carry the information on the attack of the first tower, followed by CNN. Whereas the instrumental surveillance is about the transmission of day-to-day useful and helpful information to the people. Yeah, all the political development, economic development, and all those things. Yeah. Correlation of the parts of the society in responding to the environment is done mostly by the government, political leaders, reporters, analysts, and pressure groups, where we are trying to interpret issues and provide solutions on issues, bearing the public attitudes in our mind. Yeah. The other one is the social heritage, where we are trying to pass it on to one generation to the next, which is carried out by educators in family and schools. We see that Dominic points out that the transmission of values is subtle, but very important as part of the mass communication. He described it as a socialization function, as the way an individual comes to adopt the behavior and values of a group. He says that sometimes media consciously try to instill values and behavior in the audiences. For example, Times of India reported a story on an old retired man suffering from dementia who was found dead in slum. The story was written by daughter-in-law who exhorted the people to be sympathetic towards the old and needy for the society. Warnings of smoking hazards have become a common feature, and when anyone is shown smoking on the advertisements, and smoking-related health issues are necessarily shown before the movie in cinema halls. So this is also one part of, mass communication, where we see that, you are trying to pass on the information from one generation to the other. So when we have, communication related to the news, we see that, sociologist Paul Lazarsfeld and Robert Merton suggested two other functions of mass communication which are related to the news. They are status conferral and the enforcement of social norms. Yeah. Status conferral means where reports are trying to enhance the status of an individual. Yeah. Through the power of media, society confirms high status on some people. So mass communication has an ethicizing function when it tries to strengthen social control over the individual members by bringing deviant behavior into public view. So it is basically also having, according to the sociologist Paul Lazarsfeld and Merton, that there are other two functions that are called as status conferral and enforcement of social norms. So now let us understand the advantages and disadvantages. Even mass communication has two sides of a coin. It has the advantages is that, it has a vast audience base. It disseminates information with a speed and has a low cost. Then it legitimizes issues and happenings. It is a platform that mediates between state and public, brings issues in the public domain, and also questions and connects the people at the times of crisis. And also it is a source of entertainment, and where it, helps in de-stressing out and all those things, and creates larger than life image, and identifies, selects, evaluates, and presents events happening or carrying various perspective. Yeah. So when disadvantages, basically we see it from the recipient's perspective. Yeah. What I understand is not necessarily understood by you, or you might have a better understanding. So the disadvantages for the mass communication is from the point of recipient perspective. So what are those? Those are that the mass communication is vertical communication without instant feedback, which is one of the characteristics also. Then we see that, the relationship between source and a receiver is ambiguous in nature. The public is under the direct control of the communicator. Yeah. So the source and the receiver, what the source is trying to intend is not really been understood, or it could be misunderstood, or could be understood, thus it is ambiguous in nature. Yeah. Audience have no choice on the content. Yeah. Then mass communication is not objective like others. It would like others to believe it. Then exaggeration, sensationalization, reflection of violence is a commonplace in mass media. Mass media have the potential to make people a social and media zombies also. So these are the certain disadvantages. So we have understood what is mass communication, the nature, the functions of the and the advantages and the disadvantages of the mass communication. Yeah. Then moving on to the unit 8, that is trends in mass communication. So the objectives of this lesson is that, we'll understand the broad scope of studies in communication science, present the views of communication science, and understand the semiotics theory, understand the concept of communication relationship, and what is a globalization relationship with the media, and a global village and information revolution, and end with the demassification. So we understand that, that communication is very vital in the society, and mass communication has taken this communication a step ahead to get connected. So seeing that into consideration, let us understand this one. So we have a communication science. So communication science is basically the study of the content, messages, and consequences of the media and communication. It refers to the schools of scientific research of human communication. So as a student of mass communication, we have to understand that what we speak, how we speak, what is that you are understanding is all part of the communication science, because the communication science is trying to understand the contents, uses, and consequences of the media. Then we see that, there is basically a perspective that follows, that is called as the logical positivist tradition of inquiry. Most modern communication science fall into this tradition of post-positivism. Communication scientists believe that there is an objective and independent reality that can be accessed through the scientific inquiry. So this is all related to our research. So communication studies the content, as we said. So logical positivism and logical empirism, which together formed neo-positivism, was a movement in Western philosophy that embraced verificationism, an approach that sought to legitimize philosophical discourse. So in a simple language, we understand that, there is a concept of a communication science wherein it tries to do an logical positivism and logical empirism and the verification to legitimize the philosophical discourse shared between the sender and the receiver. So in this theory of knowledge, the statements are verifiable, yeah, logically and empirically, and that could be cognitively meaningful. So that is how we do the communication research. However, we see that there are two views of communication science, that is the ritual view and the transmission view. So the ritual view of communication is an old age view that usually is emphasized was in American scholarship. The basic function through which the view of communication focuses is the fostering of a sense of community across time. The ritual model can be expressed through the name that it acquires. That is, from the rituals are simply known as a set of actions that are performed in repetition, usually executed for a form of symbolic, culture, and religious significance. Like the view is associated to such words that are related to sharing, fellowship, which are linked to the basic function of view itself. Community, commonness, communion, communication. So rituals are created and then recreated by its participants over a time span of generations and can metaphorically seen as a form of a ceremony. So it is basically, the ritual view where it is been practiced as part of a tradition or a ritual. A ritual view of communication is directed not toward the extension of a message, but towards the maintenance of the society. It is not the act of imparting information, but the representation of the shared beliefs. So we see that, this wave should not be looked as a way to know information, but rather to essentially understand the idea. So when we are talking about the ritual wave, it is basically an idea, but that is trying to maintain our society through shared beliefs as a way of communication. Yeah. Then we have this transmission view. The transmission view of communication is the most common form of communication. This is portrayed through the metaphor of geography and transportation. Instances involving the movement of goods or people, often related to the sending, receiving, and giving information to others, is known as communication. So the basic function, that this view centers on is its influence across space and accuracy of transmission. So basically, the center of this idea of communication is the transmissions or signals or messages over distance for the purpose of control. It is a view of communication that derives from one of the most ancient of human dreams, the desire to increase the speed and effect of message as they travel in space. So basically, it is a sender and receiver system that follows. For example, a newspaper in information media, which helps to pass on the news and knowledge. So that is basically the transmission view. Then we have social semantic theory. It is an approach to communication that seeks to understand how people communicate by a variety of means in a social setting. Modes of communication are accomplished, are basically a fixed set of rules and structure, but because of what they can accomplish socially in everyday instantiation or representation of an idea in the form of an instance. Basically, it means to say that, it is a different approach. It is a social semantic, is an approach to communication where it is trying to understand how people communicate by variety of means in particular social setting. Yeah. A key question is how people make signs in the context of interpersonal and institutional power relations to achieve specific aims. Fundamentally, important is to understand that the semiotic systems can shape social relations and society itself. One essential aspect of social semantic theory is the principle that modes of communication offer historically specific and socially and culturally shared options. Yeah. For communicating. Semantics are originally defined by Ferdinand de Saussure that it is the science of a life of science in society. Basically, it is mean to, the symbols, the signs that we see, it is semantic is something of that sort. Yeah. Then we have conceptual. So semantic theory is concerned with the process of interpreting and using signs and symbol, which is represented by our daily experience in different social environments or the situation. So this is at once a microscopic or a macroscopic theory spearheaded by Carl Jensen to provide support for critical cultural scholarship. In the same way, we see that communication science helps to create a consensus among empirical media researchers. This theory has evolved against the backdrop of the skepticism and endangered the communication science scholars, and it has emerged during the critical cultural studies also. So when we say that, we have also an approaches where we try to bring a consensus among the sender and the receiver. We see that, the communication science is trying to bring an empirical consensus in a process of communication. In the first place, we see that, the media increasingly is trying to serve the daily routines of individual and the society in terms of political, economical, and cultural sphere, which we cannot rule. So as institutions, the mass media becomes point of reference in these spheres. For example, when we see the early morning news, it becomes a symbol of linking up with the temporal structure and event bulletins in the community, the nation, and the world. So why do we read the newspapers is because we are somehow getting connected and trying to understand what is happening in the society. There are certain strengths and weaknesses of a social semantic theory also. The strengths claimed are that it differentiates between the descriptive popular culture research and theory-based research. All this is related to something when we go into the communication research. Then we see that there is a communication revolution. Yeah. So communication has become very easy and very much popular, and has become a in thing in today's with the technological advances. So we see that that communication there is a communication research revolution that is going on. Yeah. We also see that because of the communication, there is an elimination of distances and ultimate market, this expansion of the market. So if you refer to the Bill Gates, co-founder of Microsoft, articulated his vision in the following quotations. What he says that, according to Bill Gates, the communication revolution is that it is just a beginning, and it will take place are over several decades and will be driven by new applications, new tools, often meeting currently unforeseen, which it's very true also. Now, when the internet started, then we had only the email. Then we have seen that, with the technological advances, then we have websites, and then we have started getting the new tools. Now we are into the, surplus information society, with the help of new tools, apps getting developed. Then we see that it is a two-way interactive media, that, basically it is a two-way interactive media also. Yeah. Then when we are referring to the two-way interactive media, these are the new opportunities that are being used directly and active users. For example, the Facebook and all those things can be said as that one. So as part of the communication revolution, we also see that, unlike a delayed feedback or something, we have a two-way interactive media also. Then we have telephone era that has during the 20th century, that is called as the telephone century. And the telephone was and is generally available. Now we see that, the transformation with the technological advance is the mobile. Then now with these growing communication technologies, we see the digital hub also. Yeah. Digital hub offered by Steve Jobs. So, who was he? He was the CEO of Apple Computer. As describing by the technology Tim Bajrain, Jobs used his keynote address at 2001, and he unveiled a diverse set of multimedia applications such as iTunes, iMovie, iDVD. So these are all the various forms of digital communication. So globalization in media. Yeah. We understand that globalization is a process of international integration arising from the interchange. It is basically getting, now the world has turned into a global village because of the globalization. Yeah. And the globalization became as a part of a new world order after the end of Cold War in 1980s. Yeah. Then this flow is essential because we have now got MNC, so we need to be get communicated. So globalization is also has created more of communication revolution. Then the media, which happily this media multi-organization depend heavily on communication technologies, and these new technologies are introduced. The organizations take these advancements of technologies, there is a possibility the organization will keep growing. So these are financial data flow freely across national boundaries and now into computers in regional and international headquarters. Yeah, at the same time, it is possible for the MNCs and NGOs to monitor the activity of the corporation. For example, if you see that if any corporation is exploiting workers in the third world nation, these activities can be exposed through the media. Then, as I told you, the global village is something, a term closely associated with Marshall McLuhan, who popularized in his book called The Gutenberg Galaxy, Making of a Typographic Man and Understanding Media. So McLuhan described how the globe has been contracted into a village by electric technology and instantaneous movements. That is how we can contact our, dear ones, anytime, anywhere, from anywhere with the help of the technology. Yeah. Then information revolution with the communication also, we see that there is a revolution in the information also. So, uh, before we understand that one, the first revolution that was taken was the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution. Now it is the information revolution. We see that the agricultural revolution changed human lives from nomads to living in settlements. The need to defend territory was felt. Feudalism was there, which was fought. It was based for the growth of trade and commerce. Then, when we see this industrialization post came in the wake of scientific and technological breakthroughs, and after that this has now turned into a information revolution. So telecommuters, this was followed by the information revolution, which ushered in the network society. So when we are saying telecommunicators, it is related to the network society. It opened new horizons and test the limits and the ability of political and economic leaders. Yeah. So now we have demassification of media also. When we say demassification, it simply refers to the restructuring of media industry into smaller independent operating entities. It also implies the ability of the media user to select from a wide menu. You know, unlike traditional mass media, the new media like the internet provides selectivity characteristics that allows individuals to tailor message to their needs. Advancement in the technology has definitely put an impact in the way that we are receiving the information, and it is no longer centralized around elite media groups. We now have 1,000 of different media outlets or sources of information with the help of the internet, and which are keep growing day to day basis. The control has shifted from the center to the user and from the few to the many. The audience has a total freedom to choose the type of information it receives and the form that it takes place, and even at what time it wants to receive it. Yeah. Notification and all those of the, if we refer to the YouTube and all those things, that could also be part of that one. However, we see that, demassification of media, of course, cut across the major mass media. That is, what are the major mass media? Vehicles, print, electronic broadcaster. With the advent of the technologies and increased market segmentation, the power and influence of mass media progressively diminished worldwide during the later part of the 20th century because of technological advancements. But every media has its own advantages and every media has its own existence. The radio's influence has, for example, diminished through the years with the advent of MTV, a music video cable channel launched in the 1980s, to MP3 in 1990s, and more recently by the Apple iPod in the early 21st century. So anyhow, when we see that, getting equipped to the digital technologies and all those things, we see that those traditional media in terms of print and all those things might have lost the significance, but they too have adopted to the digital technologies. So it's an horizontal way of reaching to the people. So thus, we understand that what is mass communication and the contents of the mass communication and communication science, which are part of the process of communication, and also we deal with day-to-day media. So thus, I come to the end of this session. And if anything or any information or any question, please let me know.
Ma'am, good morning, ma'am.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah.
Ma'am, today we completed 7th and 8th units. 7th
Sorry?
and 8th
Yeah.
topics. So, ma'am, I would like to say that you are going just very fast. So, we are listening continuously, but we want two-way interaction. Sometimes we are stuck to some point, we can't ask anything. So, in that way, please, ma'am, next class, specific topic, if you want to just explain now. So explain in a broad, briefly manner, ma'am, because in this dissemination, this must demassification of media, it's having different terms, and global village, something which is very new to us, like globalization. So we want this topic to be like discuss in a brief manner, so that we can have a good idea,
better
basic
understanding.
idea. Yeah,
Agreed,
ma'am.
agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am. Sorry
See,
for the interference. Like
no,
I
no, the
feel so.
last 10 minutes, see, that is
Huh.
what, communication is only effective when we have a feedback and one-to-one interaction, right?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
as part of that only, we are doing. So after I finish the explanation, what you
Hmm.
can do is, see, you wanted to know more information. See, I'm catering here to larger audiences, you
Yes,
know,
ma'am.
who might have
Yes.
understood or who would read and understand or who is experienced of the topics. Now, when
Okay.
coming to your point, you wanted to know more details of a particular subtopics. What you can
Yeah.
do is that, you can, after the lessons, you can ask for further more information or whatever dots you have, you're always open
Okay.
for the clarification. For example,
Okay, ma'am.
what is that you wanted to know as part of the global village or as part of a demassification of the media? So you be specific in your question, so then I will
Okay.
be able to understand, because in general we have been catering to the concept, but what is that you wanted to know more, I can only understand if you ask me specifically. So you always
Um.
have a scope, and in case if you have anything, you can leave a message to me.
Yeah.
You can contact me and we will help you out, because
Okay,
we
ma'am.
have a limitation of a time, so we
Yeah.
cannot go. And as you know that there are only 8 contact classes. So as
Hmm.
part of that one, we are supposed to complete all the units. Otherwise, the syllabus would be left
Oh.
incomplete. So we have
I,
our own issues and challenges. But when
hmm.
you are, like for example, what is that you wanted to know through the global village?
Actually, ma'am, it's a digital hub that you already explained. That definitions I put in my reader. I just underlined the things which you have discussed. So mostly, like in a telephone era, you explain about telephone century
No,
and
no, these are part of the information revolutions. See, what are the part of the information revolutions? What is telecommuters? So we understand that there is a information revolution with the technological advancements. So
hmm.
here with the networking, with the networks, the social network, social sites, networks, and all those things. Now we have become a telecommunicators. That means we are using different modes of communication instantaneously to reach to the people in terms of political and economic leaders also. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when we say that, the information society, what is information society? It is something where we are trying to take the help of the technology and also understand the social and economic backgrounds of a developed world, and also understand how they are working and how the media is also playing an important role in, in their day-to-day activities. Now we see that, because of the information revolution, the barriers have been come down, and therefore we can reach and to the public, to the leaders, know that what are the advantages of this growing technology and all those things. So we are being called as the telecommunicators. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
telecommunicating is using of the information related technologies to communicate and reach according to your need, and try to communicate according to your need.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is
Hmm.
basically related to the information related industries, where we see that, we are using all kinds of technology. Now, why all these technologies across our offices or, day-to-day lives have got more significance? Because they are user friendly and we are using it for the best access, and we are also using it where it is time saving, giving a transparency. So there are certain reasons why we are using technologies, because it has simplified our use and also the access, and also has created the transparency related to the communication. So
Yes, ma'am.
that is what we understand. Then you have demassification. It is referring basically to the restructuring of media industry into smaller independent operating entities. Now, when we
Hmm.
say newspapers, they are big entities. So demassification, because of the technology, we have YouTube, now you have Instagram, you have and all those things. So what are those? They are been demassified. That is, they have been, no, it is not for the masses. It is only for that one. Now, for example, you might follow one YouTuber. So it is not necessary that I will follow. But when we open a news channel like NDTV or something, it is, a big channel that caters to a large audience. Yeah. So you have a choice. So demassification is smaller media organizations that are emerging because of the technological advancements. So why it is growing, we cannot say, we cannot stop see, now you want to open your YouTube channel. Do you ask the government, or do you ask me, or do you ask any Ambedkar University people that, or you follow any certain? No, you have a mail, you just open your YouTube channel. Now everybody has started that, what are the tips for your facial makeup, and what is cosmetic. Then you have cooking tips, or you want to talk about some social issue. So it is a platform wherein it is giving a scope to exchange your ideas. So with this, so much of information coming through flow, there are certain advantages and disadvantages also. But what we come to understand is that, there is a demassification of media because of the technological advancements, and everybody can have. So the smaller independent or operating entities have the ability where it gives a wide range to the viewer or the reader or the audiences. So this is part of, we have to understand this as part of information revolution. That's all. It is one thing that can make you to understand better that how the information revolution is going on. I hope I am clear. So global village is what, Marcy? Global village is after LPG. You were referring to that global village also, no? Global village is something where, because of the internet, with this www, our world has become very small thing. Yeah. Let us take the Facebook thing, Now, suppose you are on the Insta or you are on the Facebook. Now, this unfortunate of a Turkey thing has happened, right? Now, if you have an Insta ID and you are a active user, if somebody from the Turkey is messaging or something, you will definitely try to know more information. So, though you are at Hyderabad, you got connected to somewhere in the Turkey where unfortunate thing has happened. So, how it has happened? It has happened because of the technological advancements and this internet that has helped us to get connected and make our globe into a small village. So, when we say a global village, it is something, across the globe, but we are though communicating as if we are in one village. Is the concept. So that way we call the world as a global village in terms of communication. And as part of the, communication information revolution. So this is all about I hope I have clarified. But still, if you feel that there are certain doubts or something more information needed, please let me know. You can message me. I'll try to help you. Okay, ma'am?
Thank you. Ma'am, one more thing, like we will 2 more classes we have, no? So in that we will focus on the syllabus only. So ma'am, my request is please think of 1 more class so that we can discuss the exam point of view, what the things should be like.
No, that revision class will be given later, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
But it will be there, no ma'am, like after the syllabus completion, we want 1 more class like for the questions, which things we have to focus more in journalism, like for
sure.
Semester 1 exam.
I cannot assure that one, but the university people, officials who is coordinating for your classes, and that those office people, officials can only clarify. But as far as my understanding, there is a possibility of the revision provided the students ask for.
Okay. No, actually, if this type of pattern we follow now, 5 classes revision means we will ask the related questions related to our concern lecture.
So what you can do is that, see, in practical that might not work because you are able to attend. In your class, there are 100 students, but others are not able to attend. So what happens is that, whenever you are attending the classes, what all doubts you have, you please make a note. So when we have a revision class, we can just clarify that one and as well as revise the subject.
Okay.
So what happens is that, the persons who are not able to attend also will be benefiting from that one, is what I feel.
Okay. Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I hope all doubts are clarified. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, completely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.